day. Let us pray. Lord, thank you for the gift of your word. And as we think on these things, open our hearts and minds to hear your word to us. Amen. Please be seated. Today's gospel covers a very important issue, worrying. It's one of our greatest flaws, a bad habit that we can never seem to shake. Everyone worries, no matter how old or young they may be. The only difference is that we choose to worry is what we choose to worry about. Due to the type of world we currently live in, most people my age tend to be very concerned about appearances and how others might perceive them, and especially about receiving societal or peer approval. Others, like myself, often worry about our futures. We constantly ask ourselves questions like, will I gain a worthwhile post-secondary education, or will I regret my choice? Will I end up with a large student debt, and if so, will I ever be able to pay it off? Will I get a well-paying job that I actually enjoy? Will I be happy? Then we have adults who basically worry about everything, from relationships to financial security to their children and their children's future. Some even worry about growing old and facing the harsh reality of dying. However, despite the fact that this act only seems to cause anxiety, and in some instances can lead us to extremely dark places, we still choose to do it over and over again. So why is that? Why do we always worry? Obviously, there is not one clear answer, but in most cases, it all boils down to fear. We're frightened by the future simply because of the uncertainty that it brings. We worry that we might lose the important things within our lives, like our family and friends, our jobs, or maybe our houses. And we especially worry about making important decisions because we don't want to deal with the consequences of making a mistake. This gospel reassures us that there really is no need to worry because at the end of it all, God will always be there in our time of need. Worrying will never change the future, nor will it improve the quality or duration of life. In reality, worrying leads to stress. It can consume your life, and in extreme cases, it can lead to physical sickness. Verse 25 asks, is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? And the answer, of course, is yes. There is more to life than food and clothing. This scripture tells us that focusing on being a good Christian is much more important than worrying about worldly possessions, because in the end, they will have no value. Just like how God always feeds the birds of the sky and clothes the grasses of the fields, He will always be there to ensure that we have everything we need. Once we try our best to live our lives through God's word and to strive for His kingdom, we will be rewarded with His grace along with all the other things. It's important to note that the passage is not stating that life is without worry, because it definitely is not, which is clear in the final verse that says, so do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring worries of its own. Oftentimes, it can be hard enough to deal with today's stress, so there really is no need to bring tomorrow's stress into the mix. We should not let worries about tomorrow control our lives and ruin the present, because those worries are meant to be dealt with tomorrow, not today. There have been many times in my life in which I have worried about something, whether it be a major or minor concern. In fact, I'll admit that I can be a bit of a pessimist, so I tend to worry every day, and I'm sure I'm not the only one here. When I was in grade 8, I was very anxious and nervous about going to high school. I was worried that the workload might be too tough, and that I might receive poor grades. I was worried about exams, I was worried about being seen as someone uncool, and basically having a horrible high school experience in general. As a child growing up, I would often watch a lot of shows and movies that depict this crazy version of high school, featuring extreme bullying and insane cliques, and I felt scared that I might have to face all those things and much more, which would just make me feel really unhappy. 4 years later, I realized how foolish I was for worrying so much. When I reflect on all those concerns I had in grade 8, I laugh because I realized just how insignificant they were. Now that I'm older, I know that I have nothing to worry about because God was right beside me the entire time, guiding me along. Unlike my initial thoughts, I was still able to maintain good marks and make new friends, fortify pre-existing friendships, and overall have an enjoyable high school experience. This scripture brings me assurance in knowing that I never have to carry the burden of life alone, because God is right there beside me sharing the load. So instead of wasting my precious time worrying, I can actually focus on the present and enjoy what it brings. So how can we as Christians lessen the amount of worrying we do? How can we seek the kingdom of God and bring words of this passage to life? Well, one, we can pray. It's important that we communicate with God regularly through prayer and pass our burdens on to Him. Whenever I'm stressed or nervous, I pray because I'm able to comfortably share my feelings with God, and in the end, I get a sense of relief. He knows us. We must also learn to trust in God and have faith in Him, because He knows our needs before we even ask. Therefore, He will always provide them to us when the time is right. So in closing, it is very important that we live God-centered lives, because seeking God first not only brings a sense of peace, but it ultimately means freedom from anxiety.
Obama, the 44th President of the United States of America. I am the first Black to ever hold such office. I served 2 terms of the presidency from 2008 to 2017.
I am Lincoln Alexander. I was born in Toronto and I became the first Black member of the Parliament in the House of Commons. Then I became the first Black cabinet minister, working as a Minister of Labour. I was also the first Black chair of the Workers' Compensation Board. I was also the 24th Lieutenant Governor, serving Ontario from 1985 to 1991.
I am Jean Augustine. I am from Happy Hill, Grenada. In 1960, I moved to Toronto, became a teacher and an activist for immigrant and women's rights. I served on the committee that helped organize the first Caravana Festival. You're welcome, by the way. I later became a principal, then the chair of the Metro Toronto Housing Authority. Afterwards, I entered politics and became the first Black woman member of Parliament and Cabinet Minister. These are just a few of my accomplishments.
I am Frederick Douglass. I was born a slave. I escaped from slavery when I was 20 years old and became an anti-slavery activist, an author, a public speaker, a writer, and an abolitionist. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. That's just one of my famous quotes.
I am Harriet Tubman. I was born a slave, but I didn't accept that way of life. I wanted to make a difference for my family and for my people. So I became a conductor on the Underground Railroad back in the mid-1850s. I was wanted. They even placed a bounty on my head. But did that stop me? Nope. I returned to the United States 19 times to help free fellow slaves, including my family. I helped over 300 slaves escape to freedom.
I am Lloyd Hall. I am a chemist and an inventor. I am Lloyd Hall. I'm a chemist and an inventor. I have amassed almost 60 U.S. patents, and a number of my inventions were patented worldwide. One of my greatest inventions is the technique of flash drying, which is preservation of meats in a safe manner, locking in its freshness. So later on, when you're enjoying the steak dinner, you can thank me.
I am Anderson Ruffin Abbott. I am from Toronto, and I am the first Black Canadian-born person to graduate from the Toronto School of Medicine. With that being said, this makes me the first Black Canadian-born doctor. I later became a surgeon. One of my patients was none other than President Abraham Lincoln.
I am Gerald Watson. How many of you own a PlayStation or an Xbox? How many of you enjoy playing video games? Well, you have me to thank if you do. I invented the first home video game system with interchangeable games. The console is called the Fairchild Channel F. Look it up, you'll see.
I am Viola Desmond. I am a businesswoman. I am a beautician and a mentored young Black woman at my school, the Desmond School of Beauty Culture. My life took a turn one evening when I went to see a movie. I was arrested for sitting in the main floor area of the theater designated for white customers and for refusing to move when they told me to do so. Years later, my story resurfaced and received a lot of public attention. This led to Canada Post putting me on a postage stamp, and next year, be prepared to see my likeness on the new Canadian $10 bill.
I am Lawrence McClarty. My friends call me Larry. I am from Jamaica originally, but I made my home here in Toronto. In 1960, I became Toronto's first Black police officer. Later on, I was one of the first members of Toronto Emergency Task Force. I retired after 32 years of my service as a detective surgeon.
I am Portia White. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Ever heard of Africville? I was a teacher there. It was a small Black community, and I was a teacher there for some time. I loved to teach, but my passion was singing. So in 1941, I made my singing debut and my career took off. I was the first Black Canadian singer to achieve international success. I even sang for Queen Elizabeth. The Canada Post made a postage stamp in my honor. Check it out online.
I am Oscar Peterson. Born in Montreal, Quebec, I became one of Canada's ambassadors of music. I specialize in jazz music, and I've worked with a lot of the greats like Ella Fitzgerald, Dizzy Gillespie, Billie Holiday, and Louis Armstrong, just to name a few. I've received many honors, Juno Awards, Grammy Awards, been inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame and the International Jazz Hall of Fame. I've also been made an officer and companion of the Order of Canada. In Mississauga, there is a street named after me and a school as well. I was the only living person other than a monarch to appear on a Canada Post exam. Beat that.
I'm Kyrie Bess. I'm a journalist, author, publisher, broadcaster, and social activist. I'm the co-founder of The Clarion, the first owned and published newspaper by Black Canadians in Nova Scotia. I use this newspaper to bring attention to the injustices many people face and fight for our rights. I had my own radio show called The Quiet Corner, where I read poetry, played classical and gospel music. I also use my program as a platform to fight for our human rights. Due to many contributions in the fight for human rights, I was awarded the Order of Canada in 1974. I also received the Queen Elizabeth Medal and was inducted into the Nova Scotia Hall of Fame.
I am George Washington Carver, also known as the Peanut Man. I am a botanist, a scientist, and an inventor. Using peanuts, I've made over 100 products like dyes, plastics, and gasoline. I became very popular due to my accomplishments. My likeness has been placed on US stamps and minted coins. Numerous schools bear my name, as well as 2 military vessels. There is also a garden named after me in St. Louis. Lastly, there is also a national monument in my honor, the first ever dedicated to a Black American.
I am James Mink, a respected businessman from Toronto. I became a millionaire after my brother and I opened hotels, started delivery and coach services. I also started one of Toronto's first transit systems. A movie was made of my life called Captive Heart, the James Mink story. You should check it out.
I am Willie O'Reilly, and in 1958 I became the first Black man to play in the National Hockey League. I played for the Boston Bruins, and on January 1st, 1961, I became the first Black player to score a goal in the NHL.
I am Harry Jerome. I'm a track and field athlete. At one point, I was the world's fastest man and held records in the 100-meter, 100-yard dash, and 60-meter dash. I went on to win a bronze medal in Tokyo Olympics of 1964. My passion wasn't just track and field. I was also quite passionate about helping my people. So I worked hard to help address a lot of the challenges African Canadians faced on a daily basis. Due to my contributions to the communities I served and my athletic achievements, I received the Order of Canada in 1971. Every year there is an award ceremony in my name that recognizes and honors African Canadians for their excellence.
I am Oprah Winfrey. I am a talk show host, actress, producer, owner of my own television network. Get it? Own? Most of all, I love to help people. I created Oprah's Angel Network, a charity that provides grants to nonprofit organizations around the world. I also opened the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for girls in South Africa. I've been called the most influential woman in the world, America's most powerful woman in entertainment, one of the 100 people who changed the world, and the greatest woman in American history, just to name a few. My net worth is $2.9 billion, and as such, I am the second richest Black woman in the world.
I am Maya Angelou. I am a poet, actress, entertainer, author, and civil rights activist. I am well known for my memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and 2 of my most popular poems, Still I Rise and Phenomenal Woman. I've worked alongside civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, but my work with them were cut short due to their assassinations. I went on to become the first Black woman director in Hollywood, where I wrote, produced, and directed and acted in productions in television, stage, and film. I was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama. I am Fred McKinley Jones. I am an inventor, most famous for inventing the automatic refrigeration system for long-haul trucks and railroad cars. Before my invention, the only way to keep food cool and on long trips by truck or train was to load it with lots of ice. So you would have to make sure you arrived to your destination before the ice melted or else. I am also responsible for many other inventions. Check me out online.
I am Diane Brand. I'm a poet, writer, filmmaker, educator, and activist. I was born in Trinidad. I am considered to be one of Canada's most accomplished poetic voices. One of my most prolific poems is No Language is Neutral.
I have dedicated my life to social activism, fighting against economic and political power structures, racism, discrimination against women, and others that endure oppression in their lives.
I am Marcus Garvey. Born in Jamaica, I am a Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist, Jamaican political leader, publisher, entrepreneur, journalist, and social activist. I started the Universal Negro Improvement Association in 1914. The mandate was to urge persons of African descent to be proud of their race and return to Africa, our ancestral homeland. To make that trip back home a reality, I founded the Black Star Line that would provide the transportation that was needed. I also created the Negro Factories Corporation to encourage economic independence amongst our people. All my hopes and dreams of our people didn't come to fruition, but I am seen as Jamaica's first national hero.
I am Malcolm X. After being incarcerated, I became a member of the Nation of Islam. I became a speaker for the nation, and later, due to my work ethic and growing popularity, I was appointed as a minister and national spokesman. A proud Muslim, I worked tirelessly to promote the teaching of my mentor and spiritual leader, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So much so that the FBI started to keep track of my every move to monitor the nation's activities and plans. Black unity was and is a concern for the government, which is why we should indeed unite. Unfortunately, things between the nation and I began to deteriorate, and this caused me to leave some years later. After I went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, I returned to the United States with a new outlook, new hopes, and new ideas on how to not only help Black people, but all who live under the thumb of oppression. A race of people is like an individual man. Until it uses its own talent, takes pride in its own history, expresses its own culture, affirms its own selfhood, it can never fulfill itself.
We are capable. We can make a difference. We are Black.
Okay, Haley has another poem for us.
When I look into the mirror, I see a chocolate-colored girl staring back at me. A Black girl with kinky hair, but I'm not ashamed of it. In the world we live in, people like me try to fit into society. In a world with hate and division, some that look like me struggle because of racism or low self-esteem, wondering why they don't look like the others. Some just don't like the color of their skin. Some just want to blend in. I was taught that to be just as good as the average white person, I have to work twice as hard, do twice as much, go over and above just to be thought of as good enough. I've heard stereotypes like Black women are angry, a Black male teenager walks down a sidewalk and is thought of as a hoodlum because he's got his hood on. It's called freedom of expression. Some use it to their own discretion. Some of us folks try to speak up and give an opinion and come across as rude. Oh, so now we have an attitude? There are Blacks getting shot on a daily, lest we not forget. Some of our young black men are being thrown in jail for doing nothing, lest we not forget. Mothers and fathers are out there crying and mourning in dismay. Their black children are being murdered, so that's why I say, on the darkest nights I pray. Some cops abusing their power. People's hate for others resulting in violence. Some of our black women especially look at themselves in the mirror and are reminded of their insecurities. Their insecurities of their color still haunts them. They carry that on their shoulders, on their backs, every day of every night. Some people are there hoping, praying, and bleaching just to be liked. Girls and boys, stand up. Realize that your color doesn't make you, that your color can't break you, that your color isn't a setback, no matter if you're brown, white, or black. But let me remind you all out there that black is just as beautiful as any other race. Martin Luther King Jr., Kay Livingston, Viola Desmond, along with others that came before us, worked hard for blacks, freedom and racial integration. Yet we still have separation of different racial groups, killings, and other cruelties. They pled for acceptance into society. They believed in blacks being treated fairly. They pushed for equal rights. The whole month of February shines a bright light. A bright light on the success of black people and all their struggles and achievements in trying to make this world a better place. So join me in a revolution. A revolution of peace and love, unity and togetherness regardless of the color of your skin. Thank you very much.